Welcome. In this video, we are going to look at test-driven development. The question is, what exactly is test-driven development? It's simply writing tests before the actual implementation code. So it's exactly what it sounds. Development driven by tests. So we will know what requirements we have for our application. One question is, in real world application, for instance, in a very big application, do we actually follow TDD? In reality, nobody writes 1,000 lines of text before the actual implementation. So in a big application, we need to first understand the design pattern. Hence, test-driven development is great, not just in starting a project, but when you want to extend your working application. Let's now look at the TDD cycle. Okay, the idea is we start by writing a test, and this test is going to fail. This is because there is no implementation yet. Then we move to this particular cycle. Then at this point, we implement just enough code to make it pass. So here we are not even after optimization. Then we now move to this blue circle, which is actually where we can now optimize our code. So we refactor, and once we refactor, the test is going to fail again. We keep moving in this loop, repeating the loop. And this is the basic idea of test-driven development. Without wasting much time, let's see TDD in action. This course is an extension of the first video on unit testing with Jest and TypeScript. And joining us for the first time, you can check the GitHub link below to have access to everything I have here in this page. The link will take you to this page. On this page, you have clear instruction on how to access this repo. So you are going to have these files, which are exactly what we had in the final part of the first video on unit testing. Let's create a folder inside this app, and let's call this calculator. We are going to build a simple calculator to actually master test-driven development. And in here, let's create a file and call this calculator.ts. Also in this test folder, let's do the same thing. Great. So inside our src, let's just add a new folder for interface. And inside this particular interface folder, let's add calculator.ts. And here, let's simply export interface, and let's call this iCalculator. Inside this interface, let's add two things. The addition, and this is going to accept two parameters. Let's call this A, which is going to be a number, and let's call the second one B, which is going to be a number. And this particular method is going to return, obviously, a number. Secondly, let's add another one. Remember, in TDD, we start from the red circle, failing test. We are going to write test where we will test if the add and subtract methods work as expected. So inside the test folder, let's now go to calculator.ts. And here we start our test by using the describe. For the name, let's call this calculator, and this will take a callback. Now let's create a variable called calculator, and this is going to be of the type iCalculator that we defined, which is this. Remember, we created this folder interfaces, and here we have the calculator. And on my VS Code, you see I'm having this option here. If you don't see that in your own code editor, make sure you add the import. Okay, so now we have this calculator. From the first video on unit testing with Jest, we saw some, and one of those hooks is the before each, and this will also take a callback. What exactly do we want to do in this before each? So this before each is basically going to run before any other thing we are going to add here. Okay, we saw this in details in the first video. So what we want to do is to avoid code repetition. So in here, we are going to create an instance of our calculator class. Remember, we don't have this class yet. So here, let's say calculator, which is this, should now be equal to new calculator. And here we're having this red line, which is okay. This error is because we don't have calculator implemented yet. So the class is yet to be implemented. Now let's start looking at how we truly want this calculator to function. So we use the it function. Remember this from the first video. If this is your first time learning unit testing, please kindly check the first video on unit testing with Jest and TypeScript. So it should add two numbers correctly, and this also takes a callback. So let's define our actual. Const actual is equal to calculator, this calculator dot. We have access to these two methods just because this calculator is of type iCalculator, which has the add and subtract method. Okay, add just any two number, let's say 4 and 6. Okay, let's write our expect actual. Now let's use to be matcher, to be, and that should be 10. Remember what we saw in the first video on unit testing, the AAA, arrange, act, and assert. Okay, check the video to actually understand everything we are doing here. Let's add another it block. Okay, it should subtract two numbers correctly, and this will take a callback, and we do almost the same thing. Our actual is equal to calculator dot subtract. Okay, here let's pass 5 and 2, and now expect our actual to be 3. Great. How do we actually run this? Back in our jest.config file, we specified this path where we want to collect coverage from. Okay, now let's see another Jest option, which is the test match. But the question is, what does this do? This test match, we simply tell Jest the exact test we want to run. So when we run npm test, it's going to run test on the file we specify here. So in here, let's now do something. In here, let's use backticks. We can copy this and put this here. But one thing we can do is actually to define our base there. So we can copy this and let's put this here. So now we have app and then we have calculator. So this is going to be /calculator. This is going to be our base there. Here we can now use backticks, and instead of repeating ourselves, we can remove this. Instead, write the base there here, and we do the same thing here. But pay attention to these steps. Okay, our test folder is this particular folder. It is different from app/calculator. So one thing we can do is actually to remove this. So here we add /app/calculator/ every other thing we have here. Okay, and here now we have /test/calculator. Remember, when we run npm test, this basically tells Jest to run only this calculator test file. So let's check this out. Npm test, and when you scroll up, you see that we only run this calculator ts. Okay, and now in this course we've seen a new Jest option. If you remove this, for instance, and run npm test, you see we run test for what we did in the first video, which is actually this basic utils. So the test match option is very important. For example, you are working on a large file and you only want to run tests on a specific file. You can simply use that option in doing that. Now, if you look at what happened to the coverage, here we have nothing. And this is because we actually changed, we are collecting coverage only for this calculator. And we have nothing, no code. So if you go to the app/calculator, you see that this file is empty. And that's why we have this 000 here. I hope that is clear enough. Now let's go back and put what we have before. Okay, so we add our test match, save this and run this again, npm test. You now see we are now running just this particular file. And of course, this test is going to fail, okay? This test is going to fail because this class does not exist. So let's move to the second cycle of test-driven development. Let's now add a very basic implementation. Here, let's create the class, export class calculator. There is an important feature of TypeScript we can see here. So this calculator can actually implement the interface. So implement iCalculator. Remember, this iCalculator is the interface we created, and immediately we notice this, okay? Class calculator incorrectly implements interface iCalculator. Why? Because it is missing the add. So any class that implements this interface must actually have the add and subtract methods. Okay, so now if we add this add, and of course this needs two parameters, you can call it anything, but I'm going to stick to A and B, which is of type number. And remember, this must return something. If you leave it this way, you are still going to have an issue. This is because if you go back to this, we said here that this method will return a number. Okay, so here we can just for now return A plus B, which is the implementation we actually want. Okay, also we need to add the second method, which is subtract. Almost the same thing with the add. Okay, and this is basically going to return A minus B. Great. Now we have everything for this test to actually pass. But first, we need to import this calculator. Okay, so let's import the class, import calculator. So we import calculator from app/calculator. Great. Now let's check what we have. npm test. And we see that everything works correctly. This is a very simple implementation to explain test-driven development. In conclusion, we've seen the very basic idea of test-driven development. So we write a failing test, we implement just enough to make it pass, then we refactor and ensure our test still pass. By writing the test first, we were able to clearly define what the calculator should do, even before diving into the implementation. This actually helps us to think about our code before writing the code. This will definitely push us to have a clear design documentation before writing our code. In future videos, we will dive deeper into more complex scenarios. If you find this helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and also share your opinion in the comment section below. Thanks, and see you in the next one. One love.